Hello, family. Enjoy this great and beautiful moment with Afri Stories. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and comment. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and don't miss future videos from us. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Ethan stood on the front porch of a charming two-story home, keys clenched in his right hand as his pulse thundered in his ears. The crisp air smelled of freshly cut grass, and rows of tall oak trees lined the quiet suburban street. This was it, the culmination of 10 years of saving, planning, and dreaming. He ran his palm over the smooth railing, imagining the rose bushes he planned to plant along the front walkway. Lena always loved roses. She once said their petals reminded her of the layers of life, delicate yet strong. A slight tremor in his hand betrayed his excitement as he unlocked the door. The hinges creaked softly, revealing a sunlit living room with hardwood floors and pale gray walls that caught the morning light. He could already picture Zoe, their curly-haired toddler, scampering across the floor in fits of giggles. He sighed, remembering the nights he'd worked overtime as an architect, pushing through exhaustion just to reach this moment. He set his keys on the kitchen counter, taking in the mint green paint he'd chosen specifically because it was Lena's favorite color. She once joked about wanting an entire mint chocolate-themed kitchen. He smiled, recalling that long-ago conversation in their cramped college apartment, when they only had each other and big dreams for the future. Near the kitchen window stood a small table he'd bought at a thrift store. He imagined placing a vase of freshly cut roses there, letting sunlight filter through the petals each morning. Upstairs, a narrow hallway led to 3 bedrooms. One of them would be Zoe's nursery, a bright, cheerful space painted pastel yellow, complete with small stencils of fluffy white clouds. He'd done the painting himself, hoping his effort might rekindle the closeness he and Lena once shared. Pulling out his phone, he switched to video mode. "Hey, Lena," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "I know things haven't been perfect lately, but this house is our fresh start. I can't wait to show you every detail. I love you so much. And Zoe, she's going to love her new room." He stopped recording, replayed the clip, and felt a pang of longing. Their relationship had hit rough patches these past months. Lena was always busy with her brand deals, constantly on social media, filming content or attending events. But he tried to shrug off the sense of distance. Tonight, he'd bring her here, show her the place, and they would celebrate with a simple home-cooked meal. That was the plan. He glanced at the time. With any luck, he could pop by the grocery store and still make it back to their current apartment before Lena finished whatever meeting she was in. He texted her quickly. "I have a surprise for you tonight. Be ready by 7? With a determined nod, he locked up and headed out. An hour later, Ethan was standing in the produce aisle, selecting ripe tomatoes and fresh basil for pasta sauce. He recalled the first dinner date he and Lena had shared, a tiny Italian restaurant where they'd split pasta carbonara, hands brushing as they reached for the breadbasket. He wanted to recreate a bit of that magic. As he added mozzarella to his basket, he heard a familiar voice. Ethan, long time no see, called Maria, an old college friend. "Heard you got a new place. Congratulations." He mustered a grin. "Thanks, Maria. I'm planning a surprise for Lena tonight. Hope she likes it." They chatted briefly about work and life, but Ethan kept checking his phone for a reply from Lena. Nothing. He told himself she was busy, that she'd reply soon enough. With groceries in hand, he stopped by a florist for a bouquet of red roses. The florist, a kindly older woman, smiled as he paid. "Special occasion?" she asked. He nodded. "Very." Back at the new house, Ethan placed the roses in a crystal vase on the kitchen table. Afternoon light streamed through the window, illuminating the petals with a crimson glow. He prepared the pasta sauce, letting it simmer. The aroma of tomatoes and basil filled the air, making the empty house feel a little more like home. He checked his phone again. Still no word from Lena. Frowning, he set the table. 2 plates, 2 wine glasses, candles in the center. The mental image of sharing this meal with her, seeing her face light up at his surprise, was all he needed to keep his spirits up. As the clock ticked past 7, worry began to gnaw at him. He sent her another text. "Are you okay?" On your way. Then he busied himself by checking each room, straightening details. He imagined Zoe's giggle bouncing off the nursery walls when she saw her cloud stencils. The recollection of Lena's laugh, so warm and infectious, tugged at his chest. Time marched on. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. The pasta, once steaming, grew cold. The candles he lit guttered, their wax pooling at the base. A pit of dread formed in his stomach, but he refused to give in to pessimism. He tried calling her. Voicemail. Again and again. Nothing. He sank into one of the kitchen chairs, swirling the wine in his glass without drinking. The ring of the doorbell or a simple phone call would have brought him relief, but the house remained silent. Shadows stretched across the walls, lengthening with every passing minute. By 11, exhaustion tugged at him. He stared at the flickering candle flames, memories replaying in his mind. Lena's bright smile on their wedding day, the soft lullabies she'd sing to Zoe, the late-night cuddles on the couch when they still made time for each other. Finally, just before midnight, his phone buzzed. Heart leaping, he grabbed it. At last, a message from Lena. Relief turned into a confused dread as he read. Don't wait up. I need time to think. His breath caught in his throat. He read it again, struggling to comprehend. A swirl of emotions, concern, hurt, and fear battled inside him. The new house felt suddenly hollow, every echo a reminder of her absence. Setting the phone down, he blew out the last candle. Smoke curled upward, vanishing like the hopes he'd poured into this evening. This was supposed to be our second chance, Lena, he whispered into the silence. He glanced at the bouquet of roses, their petals already drooping. In that moment, he realized that the future he'd worked so hard to build stood on unsteady ground. Despite the ache pulsing through him, he told himself he wouldn't give up. Tomorrow, he'd look for answers. Maybe she just needed space, or maybe he needed to confront the distance between them head-on. But for tonight, he was alone in a house he'd bought for them, left only with the echo of his own voice and a text that offered no comfort. The night pressing on him, heavy with unanswered questions. As he dimmed the lights, he wondered if this beautiful home would remain a dream unfulfilled, or if Lena would one day open the door and make it truly theirs. He sat there until the darkness grew complete, feeling more uncertain than ever before. Ethan woke to the buzz of his phone, still lying on the makeshift bed of blankets in the new house. Dark circles hollowed his eyes as he glanced at the screen. No messages from Lena. He thought back to the previous evening, when she claimed she was heading to a friend's birthday dinner. He had tried to trust her, but he couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that something was off. Grabbing his jacket, he locked up and drove to their old apartment, hoping to find her there. The place was silent. Her belongings looked untouched, and Zoe's toys lay scattered just as they'd been 2 days ago. Swallowing his concern, Ethan decided to call Lena's best friend, Stacy. "Hey," he began hesitantly when Stacy answered. "Did you see Lena last night at the birthday dinner?" Stacy's pause set off alarms in his head. "Birthday dinner? I never had one. I mean, not recently." Ethan's heart skipped. He forced a calm tone. "Oh, maybe I got the details mixed up. Thanks." He hung up, breathing shakily. Lena had lied. That much was clear. He booted up his laptop, navigating to social media with trembling fingers. A single post caught his eye, a photo tag at a trendy rooftop bar. Standing beside Lena was a man with an athletic build, wearing a confident smile. The caption read, "Celebrating life with amazing company." The timestamp aligned perfectly with Lena's supposed friend's birthday. Ethan slammed the laptop shut. He'd seen that man before, Micah, her gym trainer. She'd once brushed it off. "He's just a friend. We talk about fitness and brand collaborations." Now, Ethan wondered if that had been another half-truth. All morning, her phone went straight to voicemail. With Zoe spending time at Lena's mother's place this week, Ethan had no child to distract him from his worries. Instead, he immersed himself in memories, searching for signs he might have missed. 3 months ago, Lena stopped wearing her wedding ring. He'd noticed the gleam missing from her finger one morning at breakfast. When he asked, she'd shrug with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It gets in the way when I'm filming workout videos," she had said, wiggling her fingers in playful emphasis. He nodded uncertainly, choosing to trust her. He also recalled how she grew quieter during late-night dinners, eyes fixed on her phone, replying to endless comments or messages. Whenever he asked about her day, she'd offer vague answers, never once mentioning Micah. By lunchtime, Ethan felt torn between anger and heartbreak. He texted her, "We need to talk. Please come home." No response. Frustration boiled in his chest as he drove back to the new house, hoping she might appear there. But the house was empty, its walls echoing his anxiety. Determined to seek some clarity, Ethan scrolled through Lena's social media again. He found more clues: a selfie at a coffee shop he'd never heard her mention, a picture of Micah leading a workout class, and a brief video clip of them laughing in the background. Each post seemed innocent enough, unless you looked closely at the timeline. A month ago, Lena had started skipping family dinners, claiming brand meetings ran late. 2 weeks ago, she claimed to be traveling for a collaboration shoot, returning only with vague stories and no souvenirs. Looking back, Ethan felt naive. He'd been too caught up in closing the deal on this house, too eager to believe her excuses. By mid-afternoon, restlessness gripped him. He dialed a few more of Lena's acquaintances, pretending to check on her schedule. None confirmed her whereabouts from the previous night. One even mentioned seeing her post from a rooftop lounge. Each new piece of information eroded Ethan's hope that her distance was just a passing phase. He slumped onto the sofa they'd yet to move, running a hand through his hair. Part of him wanted to lash out, to accuse her directly, but another part feared pushing her further away. He replayed her last words from a voicemail she left days ago. "I'll be busy, but I promise to call you when I'm free." Free for whom? Around dinner time, Ethan forced himself to cook something simple, though he had no appetite. The sizzle of onions in the pan reminded him of happier days in their cramped kitchen, Lena dancing around with Zoe in her arms. Now, the quiet pressed on him like a heavy weight. He washed the dishes in silence, then paced back and forth in the living room. Shadows lengthened across the floor. Finally, at 7, he decided to set the table again, lighting candles just in case she came. He stared at the empty chair across from him, imagining how her eyes used to sparkle over a meal, how she'd tease him about overcooking the pasta. Time crawled. 8 o'clock, 9, then 10. Each minute stretched into an eternity. He tried calling her again, voicemail. He left a trembling message, voice thick with worry. "Lena, I'm at the new house, waiting. Please come. We need to talk." The candles burned low, dripping wax onto the tablecloth. Ethan studied the flickering flames, half hypnotized by their dance. He remembered how proud he'd been just weeks ago, holding the keys to this place. Now, he wondered if he'd built this dream for a wife who no longer wanted it. At 11:30, his phone vibrated, heart pounding. He snatched it up, hoping for an explanation, a promise, anything. Her text was brief and distant. "Don't wait up. I need time to think." He read it twice, throat constricting as if the words themselves formed a noose. A mixture of betrayal and desperation coursed through him. In a moment of weakness, he tried calling her once more, but she didn't pick up. Putting down his phone, Ethan extinguished the candles one by one, each dying flame mirroring the sense of loss inside him. He slumped against the wall, forcing himself not to send another frantic message. He closed his eyes, recalling the day he and Lena exchanged rings, a promise to weather life's storms together. Now, her ring lay abandoned somewhere, and he stood alone in a half-furnished house. Part of him wanted to chase after her, demand answers, and fight for what they'd built. Another part feared that the time for fighting was slipping away. Through the window, he spotted the moon shining on the empty street. The house was silent. No footsteps in the hallway, no laughter in the rooms. Only the ghost of a promise lingered in the air. He reread her text, heart heavy with the sense that she was drifting further each day. As midnight neared, he wondered if time to think was just an excuse, or if it meant the beginning of the end. Either way, he was left in the dark, waiting on a wife who might never come home. Ethan woke with an ache in his chest, haunted by Lena's last text. The new house felt lifeless. Her phone stayed silent, offering no answers. over lukewarm coffee. He remembered installing a doorbell camera. Maybe it held the truth he both dreaded and needed. He opened the app and scrolled through hours of nothing. Then, at 11:43 p.m., two figures stepped onto the porch. Lena and Micah, her gym trainer. Ethan froze, heart hammering. She produced the key he'd given her, unlocked the door, and entered with Micah's hand on her waist. He skipped ahead, hoping they'd left quickly. Midnight came and went. Still no exit. At 2:14 a.m., Lena emerged on the porch, wearing a hoodie far too large to be hers, casually sipping wine. She gazed around a sleeping street, then went back inside. His hands trembled as he replayed it. She looked comfortable, even content. The table he'd so carefully set remained untouched, while she shared a night here with another man. Furious, despair tangled in his chest. All those late nights he'd justified, all those brand deals she claimed they led to this. He paced the empty living room, swallowing the urge to scream. Memories flooded him. Lena once beaming at his architectural sketches, her laughter echoing in simpler days. Now, the cracks in their marriage were undeniable. He hated how he still yearned for an explanation, some reason that might soften the blow. Unable to stay, he got in his car and drove aimlessly. Phone clutched in his lap. He dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. He muttered curses under his breath, replaying the doorbell footage in his mind. The pure betrayal of it scorched him. Pulling into a deserted lot, he stared at the last frame. Lena sipping from Ethan's own wine glass, wrapped in Micah's hoodie. A numbness settled in, war with the urge to rage at the unfairness. She'd taken everything he'd poured into this house and trampled on it. "Why, Lena?" he whispered. "Why do this here, in the one place we were supposed to start over?" He closed the app, forcing himself to think of Zoe. Memories tugged at him. The night he and Lena first stood on this empty lot, imagining the laughter that would fill these rooms, or the weekend they picked paint colors, believing their bond was unbreakable. Now that faith felt misplaced, overshadowed by her betrayal. The image of Zoe's nursery at the new house stabbed him with fresh pain. Lena had made a mockery of the future he'd built for their family. Returning to the house, he lingered outside, staring at the drawn blinds. Had they spent the entire night strolling through each room, oblivious to the heartbreak they caused? He couldn't face the interior yet. Instead, he drove away, shaking with anger and grief. On the road, he tried Lena's phone again. No answer. He left a clipped voicemail. "I saw the footage. We need to talk." Hanging up, he realized he no longer knew her at all. She'd chosen Micah, chosen secrets, chosen to violate the one dream Ethan thought would reunite them. By the time he parked near a small playground to clear his head, the sun had edged higher. Children laughed in the distance, oblivious to his turmoil. He inhaled deeply, determined not to break down. For Zoe, he had to keep going. He imagined confronting Lena, demanding she justify her actions. Would she spin more lies? Would she admit everything? He dreaded her answers almost as much as her silence. Part of him wanted to salvage their marriage for Zoe's sake, but the doorbell video refused to let him dream. A text alert startled him. It was only a work reminder. The mundane message felt surreal against his personal crisis. He rubbed his temples, battling a headache born of exhaustion and emotional overload. He thought about confiding in someone, but shame held him back. The truth was humiliating. He started the car again, forcing himself toward an inevitable next step, picking Zoe up from Lena's mother. If anyone asked where Lena was, how could he respond? He barely had the strength to form a lie. She hadn't even mentioned their daughter in all this. Glancing in the rearview mirror, he muttered, "I won't let her destroy Zoe's happiness." Yet he doubted his own conviction. The memory of Lena and Micah's embrace played on a loop, undermining his resolve. Approaching an intersection, he slowed as the traffic light turned red. In the stillness, he gripped the wheel, the word betrayal pulsing in his mind like a living thing. He wanted to tear the house from its foundation, wanted to erase every memory of painting those walls for Lena. When the light turned green, he exhaled, pushing down the wave of bitterness. There was no easy fix. His wife had chosen another man in the very home Ethan built, to heal their union. Now he had to protect himself and Zoe from a fallout. He ended the call, truly, utterly exhausted, focusing on the road again. He forced his eyes shut, fighting tears, then drove onward. Images from the doorbell footage repeated. Lena's smile, Micah's familiar touch, her indifferent ease in the space meant for family. It crushed every hope Ethan clung to. All that remained was a numb determination not to let it destroy him. As he drove away, the truth became inescapable. Lena had chosen to share his dream with someone else. No matter what conversations lay ahead, the damage felt irreversible. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Everything had changed, and he couldn't see a way back to the life he once knew. Ethan gripped the steering wheel with clammy hands, heart drumming in his ears. He had spent the entire morning debating whether to confront Lena at the new house. Logic told him to wait, to gather composure. But he could no longer endure the swirling ache inside him. His wife had shared their home with Micah, a man she once called just a friend. If there was any shred of honesty left in her, he needed to hear it. Yet as he approached the quiet suburban street, his pulse spiked. At first glance, the house looked as pristine as ever. The sun's rays glinted off the freshly painted shutters he had chosen for Lena months ago, when he still believed their marriage was unshakable. He parked across the road, turned off the engine, and tried to calm his breathing. For a moment, he stared at the facade. Part of him wanted to barge in, demand answers, and reclaim what he'd built. But the memory of Lena entering the house with Micah still seared his mind. He wasn't sure if he could stomach seeing them together again, not after watching that doorbell footage a dozen times. A swirl of conflicting emotions, fury, heartbreak, and a strange sense of finality locked him in place. Then movement inside caught his eye through the living room window. Lena glided past barefoot, wearing a flowing dress that Ethan recognized from pictures. Micah entered the frame and slid his arms around her waist. They swayed in an unhurried dance, accompanied by music Ethan couldn't hear. The intimacy was undeniable. Ethan's nails bit into the steering wheel. His first instinct was to charge in. How dare they dance in the space he had labored over, imagining a joyful family life. But his fury collided with despair, pinning him in his seat. He recalled the day he first brought Lena to view the property, how she lit up at the idea of a rose garden, how they promised each other this home would be a refuge for their future. Now, it felt like a stage for her betrayal. Unable to look away, he watched them pivot across the room. Lena threw her head back in laughter, a sound Ethan once lived for. Micah twirled her, nearly colliding with a pile of boxes Ethan had stacked for their anticipated move. They didn't seem to care about anything but each other. Shadows flickered against the walls, as though mocking Ethan's illusions. Minutes trickled by. He felt like an intruder, spying on a life that should have been his. The midday sun beat down through his windshield, making the car stuffy and airless. Still, he couldn't move. A single question throbbed in his mind. What if I go in now? But the possible answers terrified him. Violence, screaming pleas for forgiveness, or worse, cold indifference. His phone buzzed in his lap. A message from Lena, the first he'd received in days. I need space. I'll come get Zoe later. Don't do anything rash. He read it twice, bitterness curling his lips. Space. She needed space while she turned their home into her sanctuary with another man. Did she think he would meekly accept that? His anger flared, and for an instant, he reached for the door handle. But then he spotted movement upstairs, the nursery window, half open. Micah stepped into view, peering into the room Ethan had painted pastel yellow for Zoe. Moments later, Lena joined him. Ethan watched in horror as she pointed toward the tiny crib he'd assembled. They laughed, though he couldn't hear the sound from his vantage point. The sight felt like a knife twisting in his gut. They were turning every corner of this house into their personal playground, even a room meant for his daughter. A flash of memory flooded Ethan's mind. Late nights kneeling on the nursery floor, double-checking each screw in that crib. He had envisioned Zoe safe and happy within its walls, with Lena humming lullabies. Now, Lena stood there with Micah, casually invading the space that symbolized Ethan's hopes for fatherhood and family unity. A sob choked him. This was too much. Confrontation no longer felt empowering. It felt like a path to deeper humiliation. If he went inside, he feared his rage would boil over or he might buckle under heartbreak. Either way, he would be the one left in pieces. He turned the ignition, the car rumbling to life. Tears blurred his vision as he pulled away from the curb. He caught one last glimpse of Lena in the nursery window, her hand resting gently on Micah's shoulder. That silent tableau shattered him more than any heated argument ever could. As he drove, each streetlight seemed to illuminate a moment of regret. Their wedding vows, the birth of Zoe, the night spent dreaming of a bigger place. Everything felt tainted. He stopped at a gas station to steady himself, splashing water on his face in the grimy restroom mirror. His reflection revealed eyes clouded by sorrow. This wasn't the man he wanted Zoe to see. Returning to the car, he stared at the phone in his hand, debating whether to respond to Lena's text. He typed several messages, each one angry or pleading, but he deleted them all. She had made her choice. Words wouldn't fix anything now. He thought of Zoe, the one person who mattered more than his anger. She was staying with his mother-in-law tonight, blissfully unaware of her parents' crumbling marriage. Guilt gnawed at him. He wanted to protect Zoe from the fallout, yet he couldn't pretend all was well. A faint image of Zoe, giggling in his arms, made his chest tighten. He had to be strong for her, even if that meant swallowing his pride and stepping away from the battlefield Lena had created. He drove without a clear destination, eventually parking at a quiet overlook where the city skyline shimmered in afternoon light. Windows down, he let the breeze wash over him, trying to collect his thoughts. The confrontation he'd planned seemed pointless now. Lena wasn't hiding her actions. She flaunted them in his own home. The fight was over before it began. Sitting there, he whispered to the open air, "I gave you everything, Lena, even my forgiveness when you drifted away. But you turned our dream into a lie." He closed his eyes, letting the words settle. A heavy resignation spread through him, mingled with heartbreak. He couldn't force someone to love him back. If Lena wanted Micah, then chasing her would only prolong the inevitable. Finally, as the sun began to dip, Ethan started the car again. Instead of returning to the new house, he pointed himself in the opposite direction. He wasn't sure where he'd spend the night, maybe a motel or a friend's sofa, but he knew he couldn't go back there, not while those two occupied the space he'd thought would be sacred. With each passing mile, he felt a strange mix of grief and relief. The life he built with Lena was slipping away, but he refused to let it destroy him utterly. He wiped a stray tear and whispered, "I still have Zoe. That's all that matters now." Then, pressing the gas pedal, he left behind the half-furnished house, the broken promises, and the woman who had once meant the world to him, driving into an unknown future where, perhaps, he could learn to heal on his own. Ethan woke to a pale dawn filtering through unfamiliar curtains. He'd spent the night on a friend's couch, after driving aimlessly long enough that sleep became an irresistible demand. The small apartment felt strangely comforting in its simplicity. No reminders of the house he'd poured his heart into, no ghosts of Lena dancing through the halls. He swung his legs onto the floor, rubbing the stiffness from his neck. Before anything else, he needed to see Zoe. She was at his mother-in-law's place, unaware that her parents were on the brink of collapse. Guilt sliced through him, but he steeled himself with a long breath. He had to be the stable one, however shattered he felt inside. On the drive over, he rehearsed a calm demeanor. Zoe was only a toddler, but she could sense when something was wrong. He wanted to protect her from adult grief for as long as possible. When he arrived, the scent of pancakes and coffee greeted him at the door. Zoe let out a squeal of delight, running into his arms, her tiny fingers tangling in his shirt. He closed his eyes, soaking up the warmth of her hug. His mother-in-law approached, worry etched into her face. "Is everything okay?" she asked quietly, glancing at him, then at Zoe. Ethan forced a smile. "We're fine. I promise," he said, although his voice wavered. He chatted politely, evading questions about Lena's whereabouts. Every so often, Zoe peered up at him, likely picking up on the tension. Desperate to maintain normalcy, he invited his mother-in-law to keep Zoe for another day. He'd pick her up that evening. She agreed, but wore an expression that said she knew more than he let on. back at his friend's apartment. Ethan tried to work on some pending architectural sketches, but his mind churned with turmoil. Finally, he opened a blank page in a notebook he found on the coffee table. Without overthinking, he began to write. Lena, I'm not sure where to start. I keep replaying every sacrifice we made to buy that house. Long nights, double shifts, money we could barely spare. All because I believed in us. I thought a new home could heal our wounds, bring us closer. I was wrong. He paused, the pen trembling in his grip. Memories assaulted him. Lena beaming at their wedding, Lena cradling Zoe in the hospital, Lena stepping across the threshold of that house with Micah. Clenching his jaw, he continued, "You've shattered my trust in ways I can't describe. It's not just the cheating. It's the cruelty of watching you share our dream home with someone else. I want to hate you for it, but mostly I just feel sad. There's no going back to how we were." He wrote for nearly an hour, pouring out regrets, anger, and love that still lingered beneath the hurt. He mentioned Zoe, vowing to keep her safe from the chaos. The lines blurred as tears landed on the page, but he let each word bleed onto the paper. By the time he reached the end, his hand ached, but his heart felt marginally lighter. He folded the letter neatly, then slipped it into an envelope. All that remained was deciding what to do with it. Part of him wanted to burn it, purge every confession. Another part wanted Lena to feel the sting of his words, to understand the depth of his betrayal. In the early afternoon, he drove to the new house, letter in hand. Parking a few houses away, he surveyed the street. No movement. He walked briskly, leaving the envelope at the front door, its flaps sealed with everything he couldn't say in person. As he turned to leave, a surge of finality coursed through him. He had no intention of waiting around for another humiliating glimpse of her and Micah. His plan was to leave quietly, but as he stepped off the porch, he spotted a set of keys lying near a potted plant. They were Lena's, recognizable by the little pink heart keychain. His stomach twisted, recalling how she'd once attached it, saying it reminded her of their love. Steeling himself, he placed the keys on the envelope, then hurried away. He didn't see Lena return an hour later, rummaging for her keys before noticing the envelope. She picked it up, confusion in her eyes, and recognized Ethan's handwriting scrawled across the front. She glanced around, as if expecting to see him hiding nearby. Seeing no one, she unlocked the door and slipped inside, clutching the envelope to her chest. Micah was in the kitchen, brewing coffee. He turned, smiling. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, noticing her ashen face. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened the envelope with trembling fingers, carefully unfolding the pages. Her eyes scanned Ethan's heartfelt lines, each sentence stabbing her with guilt, sadness, and a flicker of regret. Tears began to spill, dripping onto the words. Micah stepped closer. "Lena?" She shook her head, swallowing the grief that threatened to overwhelm her. It was too much. Ethan's pain, the house brimming with unspoken resentments, the lingering sense that she crossed a line she could never uncross. She turned away from Micah, let her press against her heart. Outside, the day carried on, oblivious to the storm brewing behind those walls. Cars passed, children biked, neighbors mowed lawns. Within the house, Lena stood in the living room that once symbolized her and Ethan's future. She finished reading, shoulders quaking under the weight of Ethan's anguish. Micah handed her a mug of coffee, concern etched into his features. "Talk to me," he murmured, but she remained silent, tears sliding down her cheeks. She stared at the lines describing Ethan's heartbreak, his vows to protect Zoe, his promise that he would never see Lena as his safe place again. Her eyes drifted over the final words. "I'll always be Zoe's father. But you'll never be home to me again." Slowly, Lena sank onto the couch, the letter trembling in her grip. Micah placed a tentative hand on her shoulder. She closed her eyes, letting the moment swallow her whole. Ethan's voice, captured on paper, rang louder than any confrontation. She had expected anger, screams, and accusations. Instead, she found sorrow that cut deeper than rage ever could. Somewhere out there, Ethan carried on without her, determined to shield their daughter from the wreckage of broken vows. And here she sat, reading the words he'd never had the chance to say aloud. For the first time since she started slipping away from him, Lena realized how irrevocable her choices might be. Pressing the letter to her chest, she said nothing, as though any response would only make the wound deeper. Micah stood beside her, unsure whether to comfort or step away. The silence in the house felt deafening, a profound echo of all that had been lost. 1 year later, Ethan stepped onto a different porch in a different city, wearing a quiet but genuine smile. The air was warmer here, the sky broader, and the distant hum of traffic less urgent. He glanced at the house behind him, smaller than the one he had painstakingly bought for Lena, but filled with a sense of calm he never thought he'd feel again. He couldn't believe how drastically life had changed in 12 months. After the letter he wrote to Lena, he'd stayed in the city only long enough to get his finances in order and finalize the sale of the house that once meant everything. It hurt to let it go, but each viewing by potential buyers reminded him it was no longer his sanctuary. Holding on to it felt like clutching a broken promise. When he finally signed the papers and handed over the keys, a strange mixture of grief and relief washed over him. He recalled painting those mint green walls in the kitchen, designing Zoe's nursery, planning a rose garden for Lena. Every brushstroke had been fueled by the belief that their marriage could heal. Instead, the house became a monument to betrayal. Selling it allowed him to close that door for good. In the months that followed, Ethan poured himself into fatherhood and quiet reflection. Some nights, he found himself staring at old photos of Zoe as a baby, a younger Lena beaming at his side. The memory of her infidelity, how she turned their home into a refuge for herself and Micah, still stung. Yet, piece by piece, he rediscovered the man he used to be before heartbreak consumed him. Part of that rediscovery involved moving to a new city. He found a job with a smaller architectural firm that valued family time as much as deadlines. The pay was modest compared to his previous position, but it offered the flexibility he needed. Zoe started preschool near his new rental home, and her laughter in the car each morning reminded him of his purpose. He was determined never to let her feel unloved or insecure, no matter what had happened with Lena. At first, it felt strange living in a place where no one knew his history. The neighbors on a quiet street would wave hello, oblivious to the emotional baggage he carried. Slowly, he began to enjoy the anonymity. He could be Ethan, the architect with a sweet daughter, rather than the man whose wife left him. There was freedom in that. He didn't date. Honestly, he wasn't sure he even knew how. He focused on Zoe, on healing, on forging a relationship with himself that didn't revolve around betrayal and resentment. He tried therapy for a while, something that once seemed daunting. The counselor encouraged him to confront his pain, to forgive himself for not seeing the signs, and to accept that he couldn't control Lena's actions. On a brisk autumn afternoon, he and Zoe moved into a modest ranch-style house at the end of a cul-de-sac. It had squeaky floors and an outdated kitchen, but the living room glowed with sunlight, and the backyard was perfect for a little girl to run around in. He noticed his next-door neighbor, Haley, watching curiously from her porch as he hauled in boxes. She looked to be around his age, with a friendly smile and a toddler of her own balanced on her hip. "Need any help?" she called, stepping closer. Ethan smiled, shaking his head. "I've got it, thanks." Zoe peered out from behind him, shy and wide-eyed. Haley's son waved, and Zoe, after a moment's hesitation, waved back. It wasn't until a few weeks later, after the dust of unpacking settled, that Haley invited them over for a small backyard barbecue. She was a single mom, juggling a part-time job and a rambunctious boy, Milo. As the children chased each other across the grass, Ethan felt a small pang in his chest, memories of a life he once thought he'd share with Lena. But the pang receded when he realized how content he was, sitting with new friends who had no agenda, no hidden past with him. Even so, he resisted any spark that hinted at romance. He wasn't ready, and Haley, equally cautious, seemed to understand. They bonded over shared parenting woes, swapping tips on bedtime routines and picky eaters. Their friendship grew gradually, nurtured by a sense of mutual respect. By the start of winter, Ethan's new house felt like home. He set up a corner for his architectural sketches, hooking up a second-hand drafting table. Zoe's room was decorated with bright decals she picked herself, balloons, stars, and cartoon animals. She giggled every time she stepped inside, and that was all the approval Ethan needed. On a frosty morning, Haley knocked on the door, Milo in tow. She offered to drive Zoe to preschool, since Milo attended the same one. "I have a day off," she explained, "and you look like you've got a busy workday ahead." Ethan hesitated. Back in his old life, he relied so much on Lena, he'd sometimes felt helpless. He didn't want to slip into dependence again. But Haley's expression was open and kind, and Zoe tugged his pant leg, excited to ride in Milo's car seat. "All right," he relented, smiling. "Thanks. I owe you one." Haley shrugged. "We neighbors look out for each other, right?" Watching them pull away, Ethan felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the steaming coffee he held. It was a gentle reassurance that life could be good again, even after the worst heartbreak. He glanced at the bare front yard, wondering if he might plant a few flowers in spring. Maybe not roses, but something that symbolized new beginnings. That evening, after retrieving Zoe from Haley's, Ethan stood on his porch, gazing at the clear sky. Zoe giggled behind him, enthralled by a silly cartoon streaming on the tablet. A faint sense of gratitude welled up inside him. The betrayals and bitter memories hadn't vanished, but they no longer controlled his every thought. He could breathe, plan for the future, and savor each moment with his daughter. He turned to see Zoe bounding outside, her face flushed with excitement. "Daddy, look!" she exclaimed, pointing to the darkening sky where the first stars appeared. He scooped her into his arms, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. In that quiet instant, he understood that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant finding strength beyond the hurt. Maybe he wasn't the same man he used to be, but that was all right. He had a new city, a new house, a new path forward, and Zoe by his side. A soft laugh escaped him as he recalled the day Lena walked away. He once believed he'd never recover from the devastation. Now, here he stood, heart resilient and open to the possibilities that tomorrow might bring. "Daddy, you happy?" Zoe asked, peering at him curiously. He smiled, nodding with conviction. "Yeah, sweetie, I really am. Because sometimes the people we build everything for were never meant to stay. But the life we rebuild, that's ours forever." The end. Enjoyed the story? We invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing more beautiful stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your effort. See you again.